Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to our number 100th episode of Heart Warriors. For those who don't know the story, it was one morning in July 2022, and I woke up with a very clear message that I was supposed to do interview men, start a YouTube channel, and find out all about their journey into the heart. The main aim being for men to speak to other men, man to man, instead of us women trying to, with good intentions, create good men. In my opinion, us women need to focus on being feminine, and that in turn inspires men to step into their masculinity. But for men to hear it from other men and build up the brotherhood, I think is the greatest inspiration for masculinity. So Heart Warriors was created, and within the year, I think I'd interviewed 98, 99. It's taken me a couple of months to find our number 100th Heart Warrior, but I'm very excited with today's episode. So Heart Warriors was a series created through my energetic connection to Katajuda, which is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, the sacred feminine site. And what I'm here to do is to talk to men, give a platform to men, and hear all about their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows, tools, practices, insights, wisdom, what inspired them to get from their rock bottom to be the amazing heart warriors that they are today. Now, so our number 100th Heart Warriors is Leigh McCLOSKEY. Now, Leigh is an American actor, artist, author, and philosopher. Throughout his acting career, he appeared in numerous TV series and movies, including the popular American soap Dallas, of which I am old enough to remember. It was very popular here in Australia as well. And he also had a leading role in the horror film Inferno. And now he is an amazing artist who has embarked on an incredible creative journey, painting his home library from floor to ceiling with blissful divine works of esoteric and alchemical themes. And if you check out his Facebook page and website, you will see these works of art, and there's no denying that the heart is involved there. So when I saw these, I thought, yes, Leigh is our number 100th heart warrior. So very gratefully he accepted. And I'm so excited now to hear about how he got from, whatever challenges he had in childhood through his rock bottom as an adult, just into this amazingly, obviously creative, divine space. So thank you for being here.
Okay, good.
Hello, Leigh. How are you today? And whereabout in the world are you?
I am on the West Coast in Malibu, California, so miles apart, but hearts connected.
Oh, amazing. And I first have to touch on the amazing room that you're in. I did mention it in my introduction, but if you could just give a very small introduction to it, and we can expand on it later on in the show. Just let people know exactly what that is behind you.
Yeah, well, as much as I love talking about it, probably Elvis Costello is right. Talking about art is like dancing about architecture, but we'll talk about that later. The room, though, and because of the theme, I think is very important, is so much, it's called the hieroglyph of the human soul. It was triggered on 9/11, 2001, when the towers in New York were destroyed. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, but also what this will get at, the hieroglyph, meaning the picture book, is the way that I began. I began on my knees to really pour into what are the stories that I want to tell my children, my wife, why is being human noble? And in a way, reclaiming the domestic space, meaning where we live. This is also a place of community. So the art here, almost like a garden, is where people like ourselves have said, you know what, we can't heal the woes of the world, but maybe if we can have a conversation, if we can go deeper and begin to really deal with the inheritance we've been given, we'll begin to understand that we don't change things with war or violence. We change them with the story we tell ourselves. So this is really bringing it full circle and not explaining it, is the library, but it's also the story of the painted cave, meaning we are the technology. And so I look forward to talking about this because so much of who and what we are isn't about more, it's about resituating who we think we are. And so this is really why I wanted to sit here in the heart of the human soul, or the living library. I also call it the wonder study.
Oh.
But it's a place where we gather and inspire rather than critique each other.
It's amazing, and I'm so honoured that you are in your library today. And it was the photos that when Sacha Stone went to visit you, and the photos he took there that inspired me. Then I was so touched by them, to connect with you and ask you on to be our 100th Heart Warrior. So it's beautiful that you're actually there, and you know, everyone can see the exquisiteness and divinity of your art. So, Leigh, I always like to ask the question, who is the man inside? How would you describe yourself when you let go of all your labels of, you know, you've been an esteemed actor, author, philosopher, artist? Who's the man inside?
The man inside is Adam, and I mean that as a man. And I think we have to reclaim the narrative that we are and begin to understand the wound, the sense of unforgiven, in a sense that we're unforgivable. That somehow I committed a crime I don't know how, but I feel responsible for. This is really what I felt very deeply compelled by, this sense of the inescapable sense that without forgiveness, I could not forgive myself. And it wasn't me personally. It was like the sins of the father, that heavy coat of, if I don't find a way to tell a story that begins to heal the story. And what is interesting for me, because it's an interesting question about masculinity, about why in traditional culture we have so many different, like the sannyasi in the Indian tradition going off after having lived a worldly life, meaning that like seasons, it was that we began to understand masculinity as a type of generational or a tree-like activity, and that gave men a sense of strength. I see the tree, brother. I see that I am not defined in how I'm different from you, but that we carry the same sorrows. So let us not compare sorrows, but let us find a way to tell a story that helps heal my brother's sorrow, because it helps heal me, but also help heal my son, the grandson. And of course, it will help heal woman as well. But what I found, and I do feel this so strongly, is that I was very blessed because of Carla, my wife, meeting her very early in my life, and really her being the catalyst, almost the alchemical queen to the alchemical king, meaning that she was that and who could love me unconditionally and conditionally. And I started to understand that that's the etiquette of what we think of as the feminine, both outside and within. It's, how do you treat me? How are you treating yourself? Don't tell me a truth you can't live by. Be authentic. So all of this, that's why what I'm talking about now, I'm 68, and I'm as surprised as hell by that, because I've always pictured myself a young man. You know, I was like, now I go, oh my God, I'm a grandfather. But it also gives me this sense of being an elder, almost like I don't, I understand the fury, I understand who am I? I understand the fierceness, the ferocity, of swimming out into the ocean almost to drown just because you have to feel alive. I get it. But the question for me was, how do we really, and this had to do with the hero's journey, which is, how do we, after the hero's journey, how do we put down our swords? How do we take off our armor? How do we forgive the battles we've been in? How do we come home? And that's really been the nature of my work. That's what's so beautiful about this. This painted cave literally is my home. And it's on sacred Shumash land. meaning the ancestors say, we understand this. We painted pictures too. But we told picture stories that weren't about leaving. They were about noticing brother, sister, we're one, we're a tribe, we're a tree. We're connected to this earth and the sky. So let us be grateful. And I look at it as an actor and I say, that's just better theater. It's just, you're going to get greater ensemble, better ideas, more celebration, because there'll be a sense of honoring of it. And so a lot of this, I do feel I'm at a place where I can sit in this time machine, realizing that everything I'm talking about has happened over about the last 40 years, not 40 days and 40 nights, but over 40 years. And I feel like it is saying that something is growing in all of us that is beginning to not try to psychologically psychoanalyze ourselves, but begin to see ourselves as part of the story, part of this question of what does it mean to be human? And that the mother, the mater mother, the knowledge of she who ensheathes us and gives us the gift of life, of breath. If we think of ourselves as atomic beings, finally understanding this is form, but it is scintillating, then it's not about learning more or loading this down or more guilt or you have to change. It's about breathing. It's about oxygenation. It's about holding, and that's what's beautiful here. It's as if to say the human story breathed out, not just through my brush and breath, but it breathed out through all the books and all the qualities, through all the histories. And across the ages, like the spin of an electron, it asked one question: what does it mean to be human? But that was such a charged question, we had to ask it forever. But what if we're woven of that forever? And that's why I say it's time to think more like artists of consciousness, meaning it's not about product, it's about an approach. If you think like an artist, it's I will learn from what I don't know. I will trust that what I don't know will mentor me. It's a relationship, it's not an outcome. If I think like a banker, then I want results and bottom lines, and I'll do that to my psyche, my soul, and my heart, and I'll bottom line myself right out of the picture. So the question is, at least where you live, what are you honoring? Why are you honoring it? And if no one is forcing you to believe the story, you're telling yourself, why are you being obedient to it? Because we don't have opinions, they have us. Just
I love that. What an amazing introduction. Thank you, Leigh. So let's go back to your childhood. What would you say was your major challenge as a little boy?
I had, I would have to say, the strangeness challenge. And this is when I began to understand the agreement in this world. Was that I remember when I was a little boy, I saw people, but I didn't see them just as themselves. I saw their lives. I don't know how else to express it. So they would tell me one thing and I would see something. I remember I said something to my aunt, and she got very pale and stricken. And it was as if I was peering into something that was very private, and I said very innocently, but I realized how hurtful it was. And so something in me said, not here. This is not how we behave. And to a great degree, it shut down. And I think this happens with a lot of that quality of wonder that does see, but it's not a judgmental seeing. It's like that child, you know. And I do believe that that set in motion what would, in a way, set up a life that would allow me to really be very close to nature. My father was an artist. I really see that he was a type of Emerson. But he was also more distant, like that was the generation. We became great friends, but it was my mom that I was closer to and could talk to, and my sister, who we were very close. And I grew up 2 miles from here, so I grew up around nature. I was a nature kid, so I was climbing trees. I loved motorcycling. I loved scuba diving. I just loved being outdoors. And then I fell in love with acting, theater, when I was in the 3rd grade, or even in the kindergarten. I just always wanted to be on stage. I love that. And I really feel that I was gifted with, especially old Malibu, it's almost mythic now, this story of being, you know, walking on the beach during a storm. I really wasn't interested in being a blonde, blue-eyed surfer, although I've played one on TV. I was more interested in in what I found, and that certainly is what stimulated here, more of this deeper romantic side. But again, I grew up with a father. My mom was a teacher. My dad was very much a philosopher. I mean, he really taught me to think. And so I feel that if I had to say what happened that became very problematic was when I was about 12 or 13, a bit like Jung talks about in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, when it was 40, he was a bit older. My unconscious jumped on me. I started having nightmares every night. I had sleep paralysis, out of body experiences, lucid dreams. I was being plunged into nightmarish states that I realize now were training me. You know, it's either you sink or you swim, and I chose not to drown. But I think that's also why my work on the psyche is so much what it is. I started in a sense earlier than Jung, but I think that he had done all of the, in a sense, if we're working as, in a sense, we're an ensemble group. We're trying to lay the neurology, in the sense of the networks, that begin to see that, yeah, why would the unconscious flood in? And I say I had nightmares every night from, I'd say, 14 to 23, around the time I got married. And and it taught me to be very fearless in my unconscious and to also understand the nature how thoughts become things and what we dwell on, in a sense, is attracted to us. And this is why my work then, which I took into my work on the tarot, in the mid 80s, I began work on the tarot revision, my work that would then spend 17 years. And is not simply a labor of love, but it was reviewed as possibly the most significant contribution in over 100 years to the tradition. And I feel like an archaeologist has said, yeah, we stopped digging too soon. It's way more interesting. That's what I feel here. We're way more interesting than we think. But we need to, in a sense, come back home. And that's why I do. I feel like the trauma in my life, and I could almost look at much of my art from my wife having a stroke about 20 years ago, my father's death, my mom's death, their cancer, caring for them. I go back, I start thinking, geez, everything is related to how do you deal with trauma. And I feel like that's what the art is getting at here, and why art usually is about an object or what's sold to a billionaire or a collector. This hasn't left my home, meaning it's always been within a context of, I don't want to convince you of anything. If you're not interested, I'm not interested. I don't have time. So like I didn't like theater. Well, then hell, don't come to the theater. But don't think your critique if it matters to me. Yeah. It's almost like all it does is reveal a character of very little imagination. And I feel like it's time to say we're part of a tradition that each of us are given impossible circumstances. Going back to the hero's journey, the question here is, when we are so traumatized, and I don't think it's personal, in fact, I know it's not personal, when we're traumatized by a betrayal that's very ancient and very full of pain, and we look around the world and it is on steroids, and we think, well, what would be the point? And that's where I really do feel we finally, and this is the relationship here, like a totem pole, like a tree, we stand erect, and we finally recognize that it was not to judge or get somewhere, but to finally be the outcome of a gathering that says, as a man, I was wounded in ways that only love could heal me. But because it was love that healed me, the love taught me to be responsible to love, and not to what I thought I needed, but what I thought I could actually serve in terms of, what do you need? And I took this attitude toward the archetypes. I took it toward my wife, toward my children, toward my community. Meaning it was like a gardener saying, I'm not going to judge you. But if you're curious, guess what? Enthusiasm is the greatest energy. Because if we're lifted, it lifts all of us. And here it's saying, where do you want to be? Somewhere else than where you live? What story do you want to tell about who you are as human? Not you, the guy you're not? It's like, you're you. It's like a director with actors going, your character is genius. You just have to key into it. Understand how to take the pain and transmute it. That's the alchemy here. And that's why it's art. Because whether it's a song, a poem, I don't know, planting a rose, making love, whatever it is, if you do it in a way that isn't an expression of I need, what I give, then the relationship begins to open up. And that's why I feel the domestic element here, it's 24 hours a day. How do you treat yourself? Not just when you feel good. How do you treat yourself? And I say we can do better. And we can do better because we can do better from where we live and what we love, not what we hate, not what we fear. Because our generational genius, guys, is we realized, yeah, the saber-toothed tiger did kill a kid. But maybe tonight, in our grief, let's not make it about that, but give that meaning. So that's not just a meaningless death, but it restores a sense of your next night is dark. You don't know what's coming. But in spite of that, you'll still tell a story that helps you get through that night. And I think that's noble. And I think if we can start applying that to our own psychology, we'll not try to change. We'll, in a sense, take the damaged beams, so to speak, and turn them into something modern, something we can live with. And who knows, it might even be beautiful.
Oh, I love that, Leigh. Thank you. I want to get into your hero's journey. So I think now, after exploring your childhood, getting a beautiful insight into that, I'd like to, what was your deepest, darkest moment? When did you hit rock bottom? May I ask you to share a bit about that?
Well, the one time, and this was in my early teens, that, and this is why I very much respond to overwhelmed states, because I was, it was as if everything was collapsing, and I ran to a field, and I had a stake from the field, like a guard field. I was leaning against it with really the intent of just allowing it all to go away, and I had this immediate image of a fence, and I said, but that's madness, and if you cross the fence to madness, then no one can be there, and if you kill yourself, then in a sense you destroy. And it was like a moment of reckoning that really did set me on a path toward, through the realization of how awful and collapsing energy can be, how it does force one almost to say, I have no choice. But at that critical moment, that window of recognizing that there's a pivotal circumstance, and the pivotal circumstance, I would say, for me, as I got older, was when my oldest daughter was born, and I stopped drinking. I stopped because you can tell, I'm a bit excessive, and I realized that I had to. I could not just know these things intellectually. I had to be them. I had to put my money where my mouth was. And when I stopped drinking, my daughter was born, and I started painting. It was as if a gift came that I was not expecting. My dad was the painter, I was the actor, so no one's more surprised by all this than I am. And I mean that. It's a delight beyond delight. Because who knew? And really I do feel that a lot of the anguish that I've talked about or write about, and I do a lot of short talks on YouTube, just to really try to get it. Let's talk about, let's think about these things, and let's see if we can reframe them in a way that's not judgmental or hateful or self-abusive, but really trying to say maybe the conditions we're looking at are conditions that beset me, but they're really besetting the human condition. And then there's a larger way to look at the character of who we think we are. There's a greater allowance. It's almost like it lets us breathe more. And my journey, because I had a lot to translate, a lot of energy that did not make any sense. And you walk in here, I'm not sure you'd say it still makes sense, but in a way it became art. It had to transcend, in a sense, the chaos from which it was born. Because I really, I often say that art is not what you do because you're creative, it's what you do to not go mad. In other words, that the impetus is not subtle, it drags you by the collar and insists that if you don't do this, incoming, no, I don't know if you hear that, but it drags you by the collar and says you will be doing that. That's why, I with acting, I'd say people say, You know, I was thinking about acting. I said, that's not strong enough. Should I act? No, if you can get should in there, forget it. Because you must do it. Because you'll be drop kicked over and over again. And you've got to get to a point where you go, hey, I got to put wind in my own sails because I'm convinced I can do this, even if they're not. But I'm not going to blame them and then act with a chip on my shoulder. And that's sort of what the ballast here was. I started to use, when I was doing the show Dallas, it was odd because I had done much better work as an actor before, and I was doing work I wasn't tremendously delighted with just because it was very limiting or limited. But that was my own fault too. I should have been blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but that sense of that moment where it triggers the art, the sense that from one level, if I don't find a way to make some sense of this inner turmoil, because I had during those years and for about 5 more years, I would every night I would have these out of body experiences, and that's what began my work on what's called the Codex Tor books, because I realized in an odd way that the actor side of me gave me a freedom from belief. I didn't have to believe what was going on. I didn't have to like go, I'm a prophet, which, you know, shut up. But I think that's also why I stayed home, so I wouldn't have to do, you know, like in other words, that I really wanted to use my pen and brush as a way of asking questions. And my dad was a painter, said, if you can't talk about something, paint it. And so I kind of went to town on it because that's what I did as an actor. I would use the tools of creativity as a way of finding self-expression. That's another therapeutic thing. I always try to get, because when I do a Chia painting class, I get large pieces of paper, and I highly suggest this because you can close the door where you live. Don't think, well, now I've got to be an artist and prove I can do this, but rather go the other way. I don't have to be an artist. I have to connect. And let me connect with the creative breath, my creative self, not by being optical, but energetic. And that's why I give them finger paint and I get their bodies involved with, really feel the ground like a lion, like a lioness, meaning that you feel this primal relatedness. Because a lot of what's happened is, of course, we've been so shut off from these primary energies. And I realized that I'm an odd hybrid in an odd way. Like I had to find a sense of questions that the contemporary art world would go, huh? Because it wasn't really, in a way, it wasn't that I was disregarding that, but I just felt that let's have a conversation about the art spirit rather than contemporary art, meaning what's popular, because I was doing that as an actor. I saw that in fashion. I thought, not in my home. There's too much that I want to learn rather than impose my opinion about. And that's what my art book collection taught me. Leigh, you've got to transcend your opinion of art in order to know anything about art.
Leigh, you
So
mentioned authenticity, and this has been a theme that's come out in the whole series of Heart Warriors, that men, to come into their heart and start spiraling up, had to be able to express their authenticity, their uniqueness of who they are. So how would you encourage men to find and have the courage to express their authenticity?
I always tell people, and I mean this very strongly, begin where you feel safe, where you don't feel you have to protect. That's why the domestic key here is essential, because it's actually getting at this question of where can I do this? Where can I ask these questions? Where will I not be ridiculed for asking these questions? And where will I not have to say like a political statement, oh, this was inspired by so-and-so, it's against such and such. It's like a gardener going, the roses hate the petunias because guess what? There's a conspiracy theory from Levinka. It's a garden. It's almost like it's all theater. So it's a question of how are we composing it? And that's the question here, because there's an old axiom, actually, of Thoth, which is that as above, so below, meaning that what is above is like unto that which is below. Well, what the last key here, because this is again a lifetime, so this is a time machine. It said last century, when I was working on the archetypes in black and white below, like the pillars, like the piano, a mythic structure was being created. I think this gets into the hero's journey, meaning that we were going through the unique journey of the hope that in the future, in a way, kumbaya was possible, only to come full circle and realize why is it not seeming to work out. But I'm convinced it's because we finally begin to understand that the battle, the fury, the archetypal nature of reality, what Joseph Campbell really tried to teach, which is that when we understand that the hero's journey is not I'm a hero and you're not, But each of us in our own lives are faced with challenges that ask us, what will you choose? What path will you follow? Will you learn through the difficulty to believe in yourself? Or will the very difficulty tear you apart? And the sense of the heroic quest is that the fierceness one creates that allows one to navigate, you'd say, the optics of the world, because the energetics are more known, like a samurai, right? I know what to pay attention to. But the question of the learning of that, and I think this is really imperative for this, what's happening in the home here, is that when I finished the tarot, and this was my world archetype, interestingly enough, is dated 9/11, 1986. So it really predicts this story of the collapse, this Saturnian collapse of the false erections of money and God, mythically speaking. And if we look at that as our psychic theater, meaning sort of the background symbology, it's saying, yes, the erections were the Piscean, meaning the two brothers that yearned for more, and that they mirrored each other. I have more God, I have more money, but both were symbols of obedience. And so the idea, not the idea, but what happens here, and it's extraordinary if you think about it as a living theater piece, it says that when 9/11/2001 happens, I fall on my knees here and begin work painting the floor, and a language called the Watcher language flows out of my pen. And very much like a jazz musician, I begin to follow it, and it starts to, the first entity is Kuan Yin, the Great Mother. She begins to tell a story that you are whole and holy and holographic, and that you are home, that we are woven of the entirety of this story, and that we have fallen from the scaffolding of the great conceits of the ego, like God on the ceiling, right? And 16-foot tall men. We've fallen to the floor. And here in the West Coast, on the other side of that country, on the floor, on linoleum, on the ordinary, this story that is about how do we tell a story that returns us home, that isn't a story of judgment, but looks at history, even, from a perspective, as we find here, from a painted cave, a library. And this is why the mother is here. Sophia, mater, mater, mother, Philo, Sophia, wisdom. Because she reveals here, and this is so essential, that the mistake we make, and think about our own psyches, we begin with math. We stand in front of a mirror and think it's not me. So we begin with the principle of distance and time and space and not being there. But she poses the question here of, if we begin with the life principle, meaning that from life, everything is inherently mathematical, but everything mathematical is not alive. This will help us understand why there's a clarity going on here, and really a way of informing us that the structure itself of the home is like the piano below, the archetypes, the black and white, to the music above, because if we put on 3D glasses here, this becomes multidimensional. So we ascend, but what's so extraordinary is there's a third level in between, and that's the domestic key. If you think about your body, you think of your belly, your heart, your groin, your sense of I love. I don't want to tell a story. I want my archetypal strength to be my roots where I love. That's the black and white downstairs. It's a black and white world. How do I navigate? Yeah, there's always a devil and a wicked witch, but there's always an empress, and there's always a, we start to look at the Shakespearean element. We stop thinking, oh, I can reinvent it. It's like, no, it's like smoothing out the ocean. That's not the point. The point here, and I really do think, that if we make ourselves very large here, we stand in the below, in the black and white of things, in the archetypal structure. We then, our bellies, our hearts, our breasts, our hearts and chests, hold us with love, saying, let me ascend, but not to leave. Let it not be the bad theater of, I'm out of here, suckers, planet prison, prison planet over. But to say, no, 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 I came here not just this body, I came here woven of a DNA that is encoded with all of this difficulty. So maybe in the pun that we live, so we're livers, we detoxify the psyche. I'm really thinking that we come here to take on the alchemy and the conditions. Because I also think that this interesting sense that only through the human hand, through the human heart, through a creation that is the act of love, not of critique, could we finally tell a story that valued all of us. Because if we're not welcome, and if we think we have to reject, you could almost say, from your mom's point of view, it's like, kids, shut up, wash your hands, come to the table, let's eat together. What's keeping you apart is stupid. You know, and I think this is what we have to tell ourselves. We have to find the mom in ourselves. I really do. Go, kids, stop standing in the mirror of self-reflection and thinking, if only I was there. Because guess what? You're stuck at the mirror. Turn around. And that's the key here. Turn around. Get people over to the mirror. And I get them and I say, look, any human being looks at themselves, sees themselves in the mirror. The end of self-reflection is finally when you realize there's no further to go. Close your eyes. Turn around. You're home. You weren't meant to tell a story about leaving, but to finally honor a story about staying. And for this, it's taken a lifetime. And I like that story better. As a matter of fact, I say it's one I can live with. As a matter of fact, I do.
This is great. Now, do you see your creative side as being your feminine side? And how do you feel about the notion of a man balancing feminine and masculine? Does he need to find his authentic point? Maybe that's more masculine, maybe that's 50-50, maybe more feminine. How do you feel about this whole concept?
Well, I rather feel that we limit feminine and masculine by our cultural sense of feminine and masculine. We have a tendency to, in a sense, be reductionist. If I could speak on a yin-yang level, yes, the flow of energy. But if we begin to, this is why my work on the tarot is so helpful, and this room is so helpful, and what happens with the mandalas that are created by this painting behind me, the Phoenix Arise, why it's so helpful is that it's getting at a structure that is trying to say that consciousness, and I write about this in the Hierophant, which is the fifth archetype. Excuse me. And if you think of it as the line between the two hemispheres, that the knowledge of love and thought, that's what this room gets at. I just did a talk on the right angle of consciousness on YouTube. And it's short, but it's also, you'll see the art. And what is extraordinary here, because I've asked that question about, well, what is it? What is this masculine and feminine energy? And essentially, if you think of these qualities as a wave rising and surrendering, it's not either or. It's a type of dynamic tango. So it's really about an androgyny of consciousness, which is not a weakness of either, but in a sense to be absolutely receptive and then actively, like you'd say, your heart does that quite well. Your breath does that quite well. We just don't do it quite well because we, in a way, get caught up in identity politics in our head. Well, that wasn't very masculine. In other words, we knock ourselves with some phantom in our head. Well, John Wayne wouldn't have said it like that. And I kind of feel like a little of that reality copying is okay, but too much is, in a way, it's the sense I'm not that. And I really feel like the gift for ourselves is to say, let me, as I said, begin where I feel safe. Let me begin with the dynamics, like what I love about this room is let me begin where I can close the door. Let me also be honest that I not simply live in a critical world, I am suffering from, in a sense, extreme self-criticism. So the first thing that when I try and connect with my creative spirit is going to be this, oh, you have nothing to say, there's nothing there, yeah, that's stupid. And you'll go back to the phone. Meaning that we fall, and this is one of the problems of AI, is that everything difficult is cultivating a relationship that will transform us. And I say this because the figure Eve on the pillar here behind me, I was very frustrated. I was painting her for months, and I thought, just in sort of painter's anguish, I went, why can't I find you? And immediately I heard her voice say, because this is our time together. This is our relationship. I am not a portrait. I'm not a painting. I'm not an object. I'm not an image. I'm not an idea. I'm a relationship. Beauty is not optical. It's not a thought. It's not what I should look like. That my beauty will be the outcome of this time together. And what you call frustration is actually what slows us down to think together. Wow. Okay, then if we can look at this conflict and difficulty as a quality of consciousness saying, I'm slowing you down. In fact, I'm grinding you down because I'm trying to say, have a relationship. Stop being victimized by this. Use it as the raw material to say, yes, I'm in anguish, but at least in this closed room, I'm going to take this paint and go, and just feel a little bit better. And I feel like we have to bring back private ritual that's not put on Facebook, that's not shared on Instagram, that's not, hey, I got 100 likes from that. Because that's also about our primary relationship with consciousness and the creative spirit. Like I really feel like after we're talking, and is that I'll go back here and paint in silence and respond to family and demands, but I really do feel like so much of this is the feeling that we must cultivate a place where we say, at least here, this matters. I wish it mattered to you. It doesn't have to, but it does matter to me. So I'm not going to go with the version that I listen to you. I'm going to go with the version that I listen to me. And to do that, sometimes the greatest strength is not to prove anything, box somebody's ears. It's actually to close the doors and look around and say, you know what? Let this be my altar to the universe. Let me tell her I love her. And no matter how much anguish I feel from the world, let me have a space that I go into and I say, I love. I love in spite of it all, because guess what? Our ancestral strength, that totem pole, that true ancient father in us will stand up and say, now, son, you're thinking. Now you're living like an ancient tree. Your branches reach into all time and history. There's no judgment in this tree. There's honor in this tree. But you must be the first. You cannot wait. It's like waiting for love. It's like waiting to give consciousness an opportunity. You're the opportunity. That's the genius there. We trigger our own system. If we don't ask the questions, then we're in a forever a childlike state waiting for some expert to tell us we don't know again. The whole point of a closed door and say, this matters to me, yeah, there'll be seedlings. Things will grow, you'll write, maybe you won't write a great poem, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It's not about greatness, that's judgment in the mirror. It's that you wrote something that came from you. You honestly had an authentic moment, said, I don't know, maybe I'll just write tears, 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 tears. But maybe I'll go out and read it to the stars and see if they're crying too. We have to begin to redefine what our conversation is, because that will also redefine the conversation we're having with ourselves. And I say, at least where you live, you are the permission giver. Where you can close the doors and turn off technology, you can have the conversation with creation you need. When you make that your center, it might not fill in the emptiness, but it'll sure allow your spine to stand more upright, because you'll stand in what you love, not what you hate. You won't be bent over into the arguments that aren't yours, but they're full of fire. Your fire will come back to your soul, and you realize the immediacy of the present moment is not to figure out who's the bad guy. The immediacy of the moment is to realize something extraordinary is happening. There's a level of perception that's revealing itself as an artistry, meaning we must show up, not with the conceits that we know anything, but the willingness of the lover to say, let's explore each other. And I really feel as a man, that's the hardest thing in the world to do, but guess what? That's what's next. It's not to be, in a way, a new this or a new that, or to worry about how one expresses their sexuality, but to recognize there's a nobility in our masculinity. My whole story here is about the Grail, about the Grail night. We never took what we didn't earn. We sought to become worthy of what we wanted to know. We held the chalice, the Christ, as an ideal of illumination that when it illumines, it isn't to illumine me, but to be shared with all. That to me, on a simple level, is good theater. It's good ensemble. It's saying if we hold that which we say yes rather than yikes all the time about, we give it place. That's what I find so interesting here. I gave it place. I didn't mean to. I also love I'm the unintentional gardener. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just grew. And I kind of feel that's why art is a metaphor that's really never about the artist. Somebody had to be Beethoven or John Lennon. Someone had to paint the hieroglyphs of the human soul. But that's because art speaks the spirit of the creative spirit. It's not to be owned, it's to be generous. That's why if you sing, I don't know, a Beatles song you love or whatever music you love, it's free. It's called generosity. Your heart goes, whoa, I am rocking out. And why not pay more attention to that? Simply because we can. That's the thing. almost like the great subterfuge is simply because you can. When the world's too noisy or you're too anguished, take a breath. Say, you know what? I'll get back to that. Let me do this. And even take your feet down at your feet, feel your roots, and understand that you are millions of years old. That you're a part of a remarkable moment, like the wheel of the tarot coming full circle, like the mandala is here, like returning to the painted cave. This would not be happening were it not a message. And that's what's important. We're in a culture that says it has to be science or religion. We've forgotten about the art. Because the art says, no, I don't want you to believe anything. I want you to be free to be inspired on your own. That's what everything here is saying. That's why when I was painting Mothership, she said, I'm the knowledge of your atoms. There are no evil atoms. If you don't like your stories, tell better stories. Begin with the story you're telling you about who you think you are. You're much more interesting than you think. And my first question to you is, when did your atoms become so generous as to stick together to create one of you? When you recognize this level of generosity, you'll begin to remember who you truly are. And I thought, wow, yeah. And that's when the ancients here scintillated. They said, we're not dead. You dispose of us, welcome us. And we'll celebrate together, because actually, like the Maya said, the end of time meant we had come full circle. So now we have to put it together in a way we can live with. And maybe as you rebuild your masculine, and I would highly recommend my book, Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, A Romance in Two Parts. It came when I was working on Eve. She whispered it in my ear. And it is about Adam and the death of Adam, how he becomes lost in the vastness of his own creation, and how he forgets Eve, and he becomes lost in pain and war and violence. And that in this recurrence, that it's this story that the cathedral of human knowledge is known, wisdom is restored, and love reborn. It's this truth that our origin myths are not something we're escaping, but almost like an archaeological dig. They've been compressed into surface values because we've had to keep moving. But we'll notice, like the Maya said, there's no further to go in time. And as time moves on, it seems to become more and more conflicted. But if we think about why birth and origin are so important, I always tell people that when we are born, we leave the womb not because we want to, but because it becomes toxic. And if we are existing within a thought form that is generating behavior, the toxicity of the thought form itself is forcing individuals to begin to say, I can't live with that, but what can I live with? And that's when we return to understand that the gift of this ancient self was to say, each of us now have the possibility of being artists of consciousness, meaning not telling others what to believe like a messiah of the old days, but saying, what I believe, let it be a garden, and let the garden inspire you to garden, because the soul is not mine, it's not yours, it's the greater wonder of human possibility made manifest in physical form. It's amazing. Yeah. We're amazing. Yeah, I'm an optimist.
No, we are the human, the resources of the human soul and heart and even the mind are truly amazing. And it's great to have these expansive conversations. Now, before we hit the record button, you mentioned to me a noble, we were going to talk about the noble key to the masculine. You did mention the phrase divine masculine. So first, what's your how would you define the divine masculine, and what is this noble key to the masculine?
The noble key, I would go back to what I was saying about the Grail, about this relationship to love, about that in the nobility of being true to love. This is where courtly love comes from. It's setting an ideal love beyond what can be attained, so that one is ennobled in terms of seeking to be worthy of that love, not to take, but to become worthy, because this was about the growth through love of becoming worthy of love rather than simply taking what one wants. And this is why a lot of my work is called really the advocate of energy, meaning it's nothing is missing. It's just that we have really bad manners in terms of how we think about who we are. And I think it's because we've done such a very good job psychologically of even spiritual, of really saying it's about me, about my experience, about this, and rather than looking at it from, and I think this is my theater background, my music background, is that when you realize that you're synergized by others, you're not flattened by them because you're holding your instrument, you're holding your unique character, then you see your place, and it's not your place is to be like someone else, but you actually are seeing that it's holding a framework that is the sense of the question of the masculine, because the Adam Reborn story really does get into this fall that happens and that all men then have inherited. That's why when it's read, it really, I don't particularly like the word channeling, but it certainly is an astounding revelation about, because it's not the rejection of the Adam and Eve story, but a deepening of the love, of the commitment, of this need to find a way to forgive, to make sense of why there is such a deep anguish in the human soul. And I do feel like part of it is we take that so personally. And I think that maybe the key of the hero's journey, the key of how do we return home after armoring ourselves, how do we look in the mirror and not hate what we see, how do we maybe turn away from the mirror. I sometimes think of this as a mental martial art, that's really taught me that the archetypes, like the piano, you can't get out of any of the energies. You can't get out of the self-doubt. You can't get out of the feelings of inadequacy or incompetence. But if you return and work not by adopting that as who you are, but again, as a challenge to say, let me adapt and improve, but let me not try to do it in leaps, but incrementally. Almost like every day, let me return. That's what the painting here is. I returned every day, every day, every day. And now it's enormous, and I can't even conceive of doing it. It becomes overwhelming. So I kind of feel like that's the measure of our lives. Like how do we become intimate with ourselves? How do we finally stop looking at what we're not? And I feel like that goes all the way back to this origin myth, that's waiting for us ultimately to recognize that universal Adam became himself through each of us. And if you think about the question, what is woman, what is man? And that each of us embodying and that deeper question of what are these qualities? And this is where I started to think about archetype, like the role of Hamlet. I said, if you think from Hamlet's point of view, the archetype, Hamlet's fascinated in all the actors that play Hamlet, because they will all be different. They'll find different nuances, but in a way, the larger mind that is Hamlet will learn from each, and it will create a greater psychic density that is Hamlet. So you see, as it's played, it learns more about itself. And that's the organic molecular organ here, this instrument that is saying, look, what happens is that we feed a system with our curiosity, and from the pigment we start to grow unique qualities and considerations within unique time frames. And that's why I feel for us in this world, because I was told also when I began this, and I think this is very imperative, I was told that the last flood was water. This flood is information. And then it followed quickly saying I was to build an ark. And, and I thought, an ark, it sounds a bit biblical. And I chimed in again saying, no, not all arks are built to navigate the physical seas, that this was to navigate the mental waters, because the question, the story of who we are as human, that our footprint, our narrative was becoming weakened. We were forgetting, again, this nobility of who we are. And that's why the totem pole is so helpful, is this sense of I remember myself in my ancestors. Let me not look away, but let me look down. And you see, even in a mental martial art, that strengthens us from this, being pulled into to being set down. And that, you could say, is when we do trust the magnetic, the feminine, because that is not that which is seeking, but actually allowing, and like gravity, creating its strength. And that's why I do feel like a lot of this is a resetting of not so much something new, but really how we utilize different energetic areas of the body to stabilize what we consider to be reality. Because if you're seeing through this and not this, it's a different story than if you see through this to this. You see, that's what the artist, if you understand that the hands see first, this is not based on things that, as I said, I did not need to take medicine to get further out. I needed to find Carla, to find home. Didn't need to get crazier. So, but a lot of this was to anchor, to actually create place for imagination, because we've been adventuring in so many different directions, and that it is moving us now toward coherence. I guess that's the way to say. But it's for us to do that by beginning to rethink where we're living, in terms of where we're living in our assumptions, what we're agreeing to, and why we're agreeing to it. Because when I was told to build an ark, and the narrative, about the lacking of a footprint or a strong sense of our humanity, if you think about it, that's where actually storytelling becomes so imperative. I was in Morocco. We were at a meeting with the Sufi leader who had 9,000 mosques. And he told us about, he said, in our culture, he said, when the caliphate, when the leader was weak, we always would talk of our poets, of our storytellers, because they carry the soul, not the politicians, not the rulers, but the strength is in the spirit of the people. And I feel that so strongly now. It's like the Hall of Mirrors is so refractive and so distracting. But if we use that as a mental martial art and say, all right, let me pull back. What am I dealing with? That's what happened when the fire hit us here in 2018, is I began to realize that there was nowhere to go. I was surrounded by Dante's Inferno. But when the fire reached here, it said, are you staying or leaving? That's what I heard inwardly. And I said, staying. And I heard it say, that's all I need to know. And the rest was a circuit of 20 days of small miracles and minor wonders, and a lesson of the baptism of fire, which is that the apocalypse is upon us. It doesn't happen all at once. So there's a drought in the human heart, that the human heart is forgetting what it loves and knowing what it hates. And this is creating brittleness. And it told me that it was the fire that would seek out this brittleness and burn it from within. And then many lungs were attacked. I think it's very extraordinary the times we're in. Because the times of making a deal with anything are over. We talked about authenticity. Be yourself. And guess what? The woman in you says no BS. Get naked. Stop making it up. You don't have to try and impress anybody. You don't have to perform for anybody. Just stand. I want you to feel like a tree, feel like a totem pole. I want to feel your ancestors like a Maori pulsing up through you, saying, relax, son. It's hard for all of us. And the challenge makes us men. That's the key. That's what defines us. When the fire hit, and you decide not to leave, and your wife decides not to leave as well, and all of your neighbors have left, and then 180 out of 240 of your neighbors are burned to the ground, choice becomes really, really, really strong. As if to say, the fire is upon us. There's nowhere to run. Stand your ground. You're an ancient tree. But only you can give yourself permission. And if you wait for permission, guess what? No one's going to give it to you.
Oh, this is great. Leigh, you are so switched on as a young boy from what you've said, and you've also had this incredible love journey with Carla. How long have you been married?
45 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm interested to know, how has your definition and understanding and embodiment of love changed the past 60 years? How has it evolved?
I would put it that, and I'll start from recent backwards.
Okay.
When I looked at my granddaughter Layton, and she's just a bundle of wonder, she's 25 months, and I say that she and her little brother Theo fill me with what I'm calling generational optimism. and because you start to see this about how we really are tides, like my generation. Okay, it's ruined everything. It, like a vampire, sucked up all the energy and is now wanting to hold. In other words, but that doesn't last because it's not about. It's a wave of the. Let me.
Do you like me to pause?
Yeah. Just 1 second.
Right, we're back.
Yeah. So as I was saying, generational optimism. This feeling that it's never allowed to be ruined completely, that there's always the capacity of the incoming tide. And you see with the eyes that and this is what the storyteller helps you with, that we really do bring a certain generational part of the painting together. And then other generations show up. And I do think that that's what now at my age and at my sense of what matters, it is the outcome of a life that did go through many phases and taught me, really beginning with Carla, and my cat here is making those wonderful sounds. I pick him up, but he weighs about 20 pounds and he doesn't like to be picked up. So it could turn very funny very quickly. But with Carla, it was so interesting because I really didn't think I'd be married when I was young. I thought I'd be married in my 40s and ended up getting married when I was 23. But she was in the assistant director training program, and I was a young actor, and we became really, really great friends. I didn't really think she'd have anything to do with me. I've played a lot of Lotharios, but never been one really. I was really surprised, and we remained really just. She was not only made my heart beat fast, the only person I ever met like that, but also I really thinking of being authentic. I think it's a really wonderful alchemy between us because I'd say my sort of mysticism was anchored by her science, and her science was anchored, like because her questions were always like, yeah, that's fine, but how do you apply it? And that's why I saw the feminine ultimately as it's great to dream, but take out the trash, meaning that I started to recognize it. And part of the joke here is that, like consciousness is at that, honey, take out the trash. Your ideas aren't that captivating because it's get over yourself. And I feel like that's been my life lesson of realizing that with getting married and with having children, with family, then with passing of beloved family members, and then just seeing the greater dream of generation and seeing the revelation through art and then career, but also seeing with friends, dying and different people, leaving the planet and seeing the arc of their lives. And it does make one much more, I think, willing to just live like I do now in a place that's probably harder to live when you're younger because it's hard to be in a way vulnerable on certain levels. But you get to a point where you really do go, look, the most important thing to me is when I look at my grandchildren, when I look at my wife, I'm so grateful that we've had these 45 years. I pray for another 45 years, but you get to a point where you realize the deal's not forever. It's precious. And that's what is coming to me so much is this incredible gratitude of reaching a point in my own life where I could actually be grateful for the things that didn't work seemingly and did work, and put a mosaic together that really is trying to say that my father, when he died, I was very honored to be with him and was reading poetry, and it was so interesting because I saw his book of life. I was told that this was where the body separates from the spirit, essentially. And I saw his book of life that had all the words that gone into the waters of time and life. And like a musical score that could be interpreted infinitely. And that had created a pattern that I knew of as my father. But that as he died, his book was being brought up and squeezed, and the waters were being returned to the water. And I've never been so moved, but I heard a loving voice say, now it's been lived. And it hit me. I thought, we don't understand the heroic willingness to live without ever knowing why. To have to, in the waters of life and time, just have phrases and floating possibilities and always having to put it together in a way that we create a unique pattern with this character who we think of as ourselves. But on the other side, Think of welcoming an actor who didn't know why, how, or for what reason that would go downstairs every time to embody the question, to become the question, to live the question. And when we see the larger context of all these different sides, all these different religions and people, we realize that we were always being born into a condition that wasn't about being resolved. It was as if to say the thing being resolved is the alchemy of why this condition is always so brutal, always so difficult, always so demanding. Because finally, in this narrative, we come full circle and realize that this cave was empty 35,000 years ago. But this journey outward of what do we tell the children? What does it mean to be human? Why do I feel abandoned? Wow. I mean, what if our humanity literally was slowing down divine knowing in order to humanize it? So this really is an Akashic library, universal library, but it's been humanized. Because if it's not spoken in human, it doesn't have much meaning. And if it's spoken in stars in such a way as to convince you you should be there, not here, that's bad theater. And awful principles. It's like a love saying, would you stop looking over my shoulder? Look here.
Yeah.
I'm here, honey.
Yeah, so good. What would you say are your 3 highest values as a man?
Love, authenticity, and compassion.
Okay. How does a man expand his understanding of love? How would you advise a man who is struggling with the emotions of the heart and opening up to love and maybe, relationship with the feminine? You've been with Carla now 45 years plus. What are the key tips to opening up your heart to love?
I think that there are certainly meditation techniques like the inner guide meditation, which deals with really connecting with these different archetypes and how they communicate with us in a way, creating an inner dialogue. But on a simpler level, I realized that when I was younger, I kind of thought there's an older me, there's somebody that can put his arm around me, go, kid, it's going to be okay. you know, and I kind of developed that sense of find that in you, because there is believe me, your soul wants to put his arm around you. Go, kid, it's okay. It's not about doing it right. It's about maybe really for a moment recognizing yourself that you have to kind of understand the lack of tenderness you feel to you is why you're angry about these things not being, and the anger is keeping them away from you because it's not punishing you, it's slowing you down. It's beginning to teach you, how can I effectively use my energies? How can I use my anger as heat rather than fire? How can I warm? And that's what I do. I feel a lot of this now is about a mental martial art. By creating, because you can, inner figures that you can talk to, not on a telephone, because what it does is it stimulates centers of your imaginative bridging brain, like going to a book in the library. It says, look, if you ask, I can attend. But if you're not curious, the book stays closed. You're the instrument, you're the system. And I think it's very important, because if I could get advice, it is the human imagination is a divine instrument. You are the human form divine. You are the technology, but only you can tell yourself that. I can't say it to you. But if you look in the mirror and say, I am divine technology, I am that which is meant to be this, and see and look in the eyes, begin to study yourself and begin to allow and I really do, I feel like pretend is not what we think it is. A lot of times it's letting go of this needs to be real. Like, suddenly this inner guide was speaking to me. And, it's like an actor. It's like you have to listen to yourself. And you have far more ideas if you get out of your head that you are this little box. But again, the question is, where can you do that? Because it's almost like it's like we have to do preliminary work. Like I think a lot of times we throw ourselves thinking, oh, if I get that, then the problem will be solved. It's like saying, no, it's actually everything is trying to teach us how to use our energy appropriate to the instrument we've been given. You've been given a Ferrari, guess what? You're going to be able to go really fast, but not so great off road. You got to know that. You know, given a Jeep, and you start to say, yeah, okay, if I was a car, what would I be? You know, what would my instrument be? Like I used to think as an actor, like does this character think from his groin or his head or his heart or his stomach? And even as an experiment, just say to yourself, it's like, okay, I'm going to think the same thing. Love from my head, what's that like? What's love from my throat like? What's love from my heart like? What's from my belly like? What's from my groin like? In other words, we start to recognize that it's not one stable thing. And then we start to recognize that helps us, like a dancer preparing by going through the steps to finally free himself from having to learn the steps. And that's one of the things that I think we want shortcuts. In my book, I begin with a quote, Natura non facit soltis, which is from Goethe, which is, nature does not grow on leaves. And you think about it, yeah, when you were 16, you didn't skip to 19. If it's October, you don't skip to July. You know, and we have this weird thing on a phone, like, I can just with AI figure out how to write a poem like Rumi. No, you can't. No, you can't. Rumi would roll over in his, I don't know, but he because it's like saying, no, you are here to have a love affair with a sense of wonder that even in the darkness of war, the possibility is still, I am alive, and it's not over yet. Anything's possible. But it's up to us. That's what I do. I feel like we're beginning to mature as a consciousness. Because we have thousands of years of Piscean trauma, meaning you don't matter, you aren't in the picture. Your pain doesn't matter because that pain matters, not yours. You had better be obedient because it's not your story, it's their story. And if you're lucky, you know what? You might be able to hang out in a left bank somewhere, I don't know, playing a harp. It's crazy that we've agreed out of fear to be so little, to be in a way trained to think like a slave. You are not that. I am a parental figure. Be obedient to me. I know more than you do. And if you are obedient, I will reward you. If you're not obedient, I will punish you. Do you want to succeed in this world? I'm just asking. You see, this is what that energy is about. That's the Piscean model, which is this cultivating of a belief that authority resides elsewhere. And if we think of home also as the return to the feminine, that's the return to the living tree. Meaning, like the prodigal son, honey, you've been on a long journey away, but now you're home. The rules change. You know, you're not getting out of anything. So we're going to have a different conversation now. And stop thinking your great ideas can let you ascend and you live in your political highfalutin mind. You got garbage to take care of, you got kids to take to school, and you got bills to pay. And why do you think that happens? It's not because you're being tormented and you weren't the one who didn't win the lottery. That's why when people look here, I say, you know what? This happened because every breath I take, I've been painting and working. Or taking care of what I have to take care of in my home or in my career. It's about responsibility, this oddness that we can have godlike capacity without godlike responsibility. I have to say, ethically leads to disaster. And that's why this is a very critical moment, because there's no technology here except paint. There's no technology here except storytelling. So this is the story and place and forms that the ancestors dwell in. Wouldn't you dwell in a library if you'd passed through time and your story was organized somehow in your cellular map? Wouldn't it be art that finally told you who you were? Wouldn't it have to be beautiful? Wouldn't it have to say, darling, it's you. Stop looking over my shoulder. That's what Eve taught me. Stop dancing, looking over my shoulder. So guys, back up.
Leigh, I've got two burning questions that I feel need to be asked. So the first one is talking to men who are listening and saying, yes, that's wonderful, but you know, I'm in a job where that I don't enjoy, but I have to pay the mortgage, I have to pay the bills, I've got a couple of kids. And it seems like from early on you were in your passion as an actor and then as an artist, and you've managed to create enough abundance to live through your passion. But what do you advise men who aren't in their passion and feel unable to leave because of their financial responsibilities?
I really feel like it's the conditions we find ourselves in is very instructive, and why I think it is so terribly hard, as you say, when you have a job and you have kids, you have all of these responsibilities. Like, how do I even find time to think about any of these things? But I do feel that it's not about time. It's almost about a mental act of creating a place in your heart, a place that allows you to breathe, to oxygenate, because otherwise we're waiting for that moment, that Saturday or that Sunday where there's this squeeze in time between the kids getting to football and it's like, so I feel that almost like your chess game, your particular life is trying to say, maybe it's not in time, but more in a place of heart and mind, that you begin to say, even a place of return. Like, one of the things I have to say that I was very concerned many, many years ago about just the way things were going, but I thought, well, I had an opportunity to create a discussion group. And I would choose books. I had a theosophy group for 25 years. We met here every Tuesday night. And to balance that, I brought in Jung and Western tradition, alchemy, and Western writers, and even Bataille. I mean, so it was like I was really always trying to keep, because I had plays, that one of the problems is that so often the compression of when you're working all the time and you don't have a moment to say, let me go off. I think this is why a lot of people are at the gym, a lot of people go, they just, it's their time to like decompress. But I also think that our brain, our hearts have to be fed by things that nourish us, that inspire us, and that's part of this sense of a community ensemble. And I see it happening with a lot of men's groups. I don't think it's not happening. I think we have to look to models where it is happening and say, look, whether it's this, going back to Robert Bly and men's groups and Iron John, and the question is, I mean, as a man, I've also, and as an elder, I've thought, what do we do? What do we do when we have jobs that are crushing us or demands that are crushing us? And I do feel that what I learned, because I learned this in my work, is I wondered at how so much was done before there was technology. And a cathedral talked to me in a way, imaginatively. And I realized that it was that, in another way of seeing, we were not in time, we were in task. And that the task created the time. And that's why part of the magic of return, I would return every Tuesday night at the same time for now 40 some odd years. And I'm convinced that was a pulse. It wasn't something, it wasn't big, it wasn't a lot of time, but it was showing up to this quality of mind saying, I'm interested. And I found that people did find, like a lot of people at workaday world jobs, because people came from all different walks of life. I mean, really nurses and doctors, people that bus driver. I mean, it was people that really, but what brought them together was curiosity and a sense of safe place. Meaning, it wasn't to get together and rage about the politics of, how that fool doing this or that, but actually to be a counterpoint saying, I need to have a place where I don't care whether it's literature. I know, groups that do everything from James Joyce. Mine have been, on everything esoteric subjects to history to, I want to honor that it's up to us. If we don't like this story, then we have to figure out a way. And this is why, and I think the mental martial art of it is, I would suggest, even imagine what it would feel like if you had that place in yourself. What would that feel like? What would it feel like to just be able to breathe? What would it feel like? And I feel like even in questioning that, you're creating the conditions, not of imposing something, but allowing something. You see how that's really more like a gardener, more like a creative act. You're breathing in possibility. And that's really the only thing, because I feel like we live in states of compression. And that what we're trying to do is oxygenate, meaning not to get out of the condition, but to, in a sense, from within the condition, to not see it by that which is forcing us into a sense of containment, but forcing us to ask the question, why do I feel this containment? What am I agreeing to? And is there any way I can look at, I can see that my boss hates me. That's a containment. But on the other hand, it's like, how much energy do I have to give to that? And if I draw my, in a sense, reactive energy to that and put more of my energy over here, in a sense, it lessens the power of this to dominate this. Do you see, that's what I'm getting at. It's like, how do we use energy through paying attention? Because you could argue every sacred text, every deep text is about one thing. What are you paying attention to? What is keeping your attraction? And oftentimes, it's easier to have a miserable self that knows why you're so angry than letting go of it, because it'd be like, well, who am I then? And that is what a lot of individuals are going through. It's like a real reexamination of who am I then, and why am I agreeing to agree with this story, and if I don't, where can I change the story? And for me, it was here, it was home. Begin with where you live. If you want to ask about what's important, isn't where you live sacred to you? That's called sacred space. You can always go to sacred space. And you know what? You know what makes it sacred? You allowing it to be sacred. It's not because somebody comes in with rattles and thinks, oh, it's sacred. No, it's sacred because your love makes it sacred.
Yes.
Let's take back that.
Yeah.
The story we are.
Yeah, great answer. I love that. And the other thing I'd like you to expand on, please, Leigh, is you spoke earlier about that you gave up alcohol, I think, before you got into your painting. Now, and from 2001, how you dealt with your trauma regarding 9/11 was to just get a paintbrush and just start creating this masterpiece here that you're sitting in. So, what would you say to men who are at the point where dealing with their trauma, they're reaching for external stimulants like alcohol, maybe drugs, marijuana, pharmaceuticals, even toxic, maybe sex addiction, pornography? How does a man who is dealing with his trauma through external numbing come and
Yes.
bring it inside to be for divine healing?
Well, I think this comes from the anguish and the sense of emptiness, the sense of the fear of unworthiness, or that it's not me, I didn't make the grade. And the journey of alcohol and of intoxicants is not to get out of it, but to ultimately realize that it is slowly but surely. And I do feel, for me, it was, I could no longer, I simply, I had to put my money where my mouth was, because the brakes. And I said to myself that, and it was an act of will, because I was thinking, well, I have a beer, I'll this. And I said, I will myself to die the next time I have a drink. That was big. I will myself to die the next time I have a drink. And I knew I meant it. And it was like a door closed, like an iron door. And I had a vision where my life spiraled. I saw what would happen as I continued. It was almost like Munch's Scream. It was a life that deconstructed itself. And that fell away because I closed an exit. I'm a Gemini. I can outthink a psychiatrist. So, believe me, there's no amount of BS that I couldn't weave to convince myself of why I could justify doing what I thought I could do. And I was like, no. Some people can, Leigh, you can't. And that's what you have to have that conversation. If you can't, you gotta be real stern with yourself, because what you'll do is you will open up a different probability. And part of it is, I do believe, because a lot of self-medication, it's also knowing limitations. It's the question of what can you live and what lives you. That it's not sort of like the rejection of all things, as much as can we develop that which is not, in a way, becoming the wings of an excuse to not deal. In other words, don't give up having your wine if you like wine, but don't, have the fifth glass when you're thinking, I'm going to turn on the game, because then you're allowing it to decompose you, to, in a sense, take you off the mark. But I kind of feel like it's not even judgment in that. I just feel like we're also wired so very different. But I do think that everyone is being and coming to a reckoning. Like, what are my limitations? What can I do? And if I find that I can't do it, I'm not going to say you can't do it. I just realized for me, I can't do it. And that's what I found with drinking. I just can't do it. I'm not that kind of guy, you know. And I mean, I realized, I said, if you put drinks in me, you can see I have a slightly prophetic, voice at times. Boy, a couple of drinks in me, I'd be obnoxious. Be on a soapbox, prophesying this, that, and the other thing. So I really feel like I just realized, like, Dionysus and I are, we're not drinking buddies, we're friends, but it's you have to keep the vino over there. But I love it when people have wine around me. It's just not like I'm not needing to change that. And I think that kind of frees you. Also, the question I would ask people is, I'd say, how much of your drinking is part of a ritual?
Mm.
And if it's a ritual, then can you begin to replace what you once did with something that's less unhealthy? And I really do feel a lot of it's also about diet. It's about how do we treat ourselves, meaning that everything is quite toxic. We put all these things in our body, we put all these toxins in our brain with what we listen to and the inundation of media. So of course there's this tumult going on inside of everybody. I mean, people don't go to bed going, God, I feel good and happy, and the world's okay. I'll wake up in the morning and it'll be even better. It's sort of like, and I kind of feel like if you can grasp that and go, okay, that's a given. It's sort of like the background noise of the movie, so to speak. But we're the primary actors of our own scene, meaning that only you can say no. Only you know if you do. And that really is the lesson of responsibility. So in relationship, are you true to your beloved? Only you can know that. But I suggest it's a better choice because it's about what we are faithful to and what we honor in return honors us. I'm convinced that's why painting returned when I stopped drinking. It was a real big whoa. Had no idea. I mean, I got to tell you that I'm such a good painter is beyond amazing. But that it did come when that door closed. I realized that what happened was a different universe opened. It wasn't the one this way. It was the one this way. And because of that, the archetypes came into being. Because of that, my daughters and family are safe. And because of that, the hieroglyph. In other words, that we're starting to see context. I think. Like choices as context, but not as self-recrimination. Because I think we remain addicted to things because we hate ourselves for having addictive tendencies. And someone's like, honey, you have addictive tendencies. It's not getting over it. It's sublimating them with the things that won't kill you. Like, instead of having a drink, have a cup of tea. In other words, I feel like we've got to outfox that side of our psyche that is going, give me more. And I speak with some experience here, so it's like, how do you examine in a way the agreement, the rituals? What are we following, and what and that's why I do. I think that as you relinquish, as you let go, as you improve just incrementally, you start to breathe more possibility, and that then starts to open up the landscape more. And as I say, it's not about escaping something. But by breathing oxygen possibility into it, you also, and what I get from this hieroglyph is it says, tell people to give me material to work with. And I thought, oh, you think from a quantum level, right? A level of imagination, because we don't start out with something built. We put our ideas into it and it gestates. And then finally it becomes, and I realized like we're growing a new human story. Almost like, don't go through the detraction, get rid of that. Go for the addition. Yes. This as well. Because then you'll have the addictive thing going, I want. And you go, I honor that. But let me add this as well, not tonight. Like you're not trying to kill it. You're trying to find a way. Because I think we really try to repress and it makes it even stronger. So that's what I'd say. I'd say really trust that the healing will be when the choreography of how this unfolds in you begins to let you reclaim your strength and power, not because you're more thoroughly judgmental of yourself, but you've literally released something from within yourself that said, I've always been here. I just waited for you to say it's time. So maybe experiment with just, it's time. Talk to that guy that puts his arm around you, goes, kid, it's going to be all right.
I love that. Leigh, we'll start wrapping up now, but I always like to give the men the opportunity to talk about anything that I haven't asked the question about. What do you feel needs to be brought into this conversation about the hero's journey, masculinity, love, the heart, anything that we've missed?
I mean, we could go on because it's certainly a beautiful and endless subject. But I feel like the grace of what my life has enjoyed has been that which has allowed for a vision that when we recognize that as men, we are dealing with the question of, well, what does this mean to be in this body, in this form? What does it mean to be me? And the heart in it, the truth of it, is that the qualities within us want to love us. But the guilt is part of a betrayal, meaning that we ask, what happened to the goddess? What happened to the sacred? What happened to love? And for us to become who we are, meaning I know I'm me and I know I'm not you, we had to leave the story of I love, therefore I am. And this is the knowledge of the mother and the goddess. And this is why we're born to I love, therefore I am. We feel connected. But we will turn a corner toward I think, therefore I am, meaning self-reflection. Because when I look in the mirror, I'm not you, I'm me. And you're you and not me. And part of the healing now is this sense that we turned from love, we betrayed love. That which was once outward, almost like Galapagos Islands. The animals were unafraid of us because we weren't eating them then. At least if we were honoring them. And I feel like that's what a lot of this is trying to bring us back to. It's telling a story in a way that if we think tribally, right? Think about you're sitting with a group of men, your brother's in a sweat lodge. And you realize, man, all my brothers are in pain. I can't do anything to help. I see his heart's breaking. I know his wife just left him. He lost his kid. What do you do? And to me, the power of the man's heart is to say, let me not grieve for you, but let me find a strength in me that realizes my male problems, my problems as a human being, aren't just mine. Maybe I'm heroically keeping up my end of the deal. I don't know how, I don't know why, but this tribe needs me. If we do that, we'll stop being so isolated and feeling like we have to have a psychological fix to something that's not really a problem. It's how we use our instrument. And this is one of the things that I feel very strongly, and why I feel that if you can check out what I do, my work on the hieroglyph of the human soul, my work on tarot revisioned, my website, which is McCLOSKEY.com, but also on Instagram, everything I'm doing on YouTube, I am trying more and have been for many years now to say that what heals us is conversation. It's not a guy coming along and going, hey, I'm the guy, any more than it's God coming along and going, hey, I'm the God. It's all of us coming along and going, let's stop that and look at each other and with compassion recognize as you work out what you need to work out, it'll be a gift to your son. It'll be a gift to his son and his son's son. Because the trauma we're dealing with came from our fathers and their fathers and their fathers. Because when we betrayed these ancient energies, they didn't actually leave. They sent us away on a long journey to say, you better go find yourself, son. And I ain't going to give you any clues. Because by the time you come back, we'll have earned the story. You know? And that's when we finally stand up. We're no longer children in innocence accepting the radiance. But we lost the radiance to bring from the dark a new radiance, which is ourselves, the human form divine. And I'm at that point where I say, I like that story better, and that's enough for me. I think
Story.
guys look that way.
Yeah.
Enough agreeing with authority figures who really just want to keep us angry.
Yeah. We'll create our own story, right?
Yeah, and story changes everything. War changes nothing. Story is always what changes, and we're at a critical moment of AI. And so I say, look, this is AI. It's ancestral intelligence. It's a picture language. It's a story that can be told infinitely in infinite variations because of pictures, but it's also environment. So we have ancestral intelligence on top of archetypal intelligence below. So we have structure. And we have, it's on the ancient ancestral land. So we have ancestral intelligence in the land. And as we come up here, we have artist intelligence, which is not to define a belief, but to resolve a dilemma into that which is neither this nor that, but born of both as something beautiful. That's, to me, what this is all about. It's relocating to a place we've always been, like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
To finally come home and go, oh, I didn't want to get stuck in Oz. I didn't want to get lost in my imagination. I just wanted to know that when I came back to the black and white and I was still on that farm with those people, that it was more than just the difficulty, right? It's the beauty. In a sense, she sees the music. She wants to be with Annie M. What does she say? I want to be with the people I love as soon as she leaves. And I'm sure if we make a deal where we think it was getting out of something, the first thing we do is turn around at this beautiful world and think, I want to be with the people I love.
So true.
Yeah.
And Leigh, final question. What do you say to men out there who are struggling at the moment, who are in the depths of despair and challenge and really can't see how to take that first step to, get out of that darkness?
I really do. I'm a believer that journaling, that something that allows you to talk to yourself is essential because if you think about, I would even read The Art of War because it helps you understand that you're probably confronting an enemy head on and you're not thinking strategically. And one of the things that helps is to start thinking strategically, like what am I being anchored to and why? This is why The Art of War really helps you understand the nature of understanding what the enemy is and what you think the enemy is. Meaning, how do you clear your vision to say, wait a minute, if I attack what I think the enemy is, then I'm in a way standing in a mirror because I think that's my thoughts rather than seeing what I'm actually looking at. So, I mean, that's part of this. I would say that part of the journaling, part of the qualities that we have some control over are the essential key. Meaning, even if you go back to a journal, like make it a friend that you can talk to and you can sort of pour out, or even just scribble out, draw out, improvise in a sketch, doodle. But I feel like what it does on an energetic level is it begins to create a place where you can, it's not to grow something big, but to plant a seed. That's why I don't have a magician in my tarot. It's a magus. It's a seed, meaning that everything is about, if you want change, you must plant a seed of change. It's not to plant something reactive, but something procreative. So I would suggest really thinking on those lines, like what is it? What is the balancing of procreative act I can take? I see the optics, I see the elephant in the room, and that has my attention. But can I back up and begin to see in soft focus? Begin to feel, maybe perceive with other parts of my body. This takes training, but again, if you start to think of your body as a martial art instrument, then you begin to see with your belly, all right, and even as not something you need to prove. And this is why I say you must do it privately, because you're turning on very old circuitry. Almost like if you were a warrior, you would be out on the plains. I'd put you on a horse and say, "Don't worry, 3 days you'll come back, you'll feel great." In other words, nature will take care of your woes, but we don't get out there. We just stay in these little containers and we believe that this media-driven world is true.
Yeah.
When in fact, it's a trap. It's the bait and switch world. And so that's why I really can't, in a way, impress it enough that everything is teaching us how to disengage, not by rejecting, not by critiquing, but by allowing. It's a brilliant move to say, even if somebody cuts you off in traffic, your animal instinct says, I'm going to kill him. Or what's there? Is that a woman, a man? Is that old? Is that young? What, you go through the list of immediate reactions and you think, wait, that's my lizard. That's my reactive self.
Yeah.
But what do I have a choice on? My choice self says, wait a minute, I can add, okay, I'll add this too. Forgive him. Let it be. Let it go. And it started to teach me that if it's the that energy attaches to that energy and essentially brings more of that energy to anger us even more. It's like instant dojo. Son, you must pay attention to what you give, you get back. So why isn't it incumbent upon each to say, all right, let me experiment with that? And I feel like, because no one can do it for you. Otherwise, I'd be going, oh, yes, it's a good how-to book. There isn't. You're the how-to book. It's a different text than mine, but the principles are the same. That's what's really cool. In other words, to say that what if primordial and Adam and Eve, and this is what part of the mythic narrative is she says to, because this is the recurrence of the apple in this motif, she said, I gave Adam the gift of the apple. I gave him the gift of life. I told him that his dreams were so beautiful. His thoughts were so profound. I wanted to give him the gift of life. I wanted to give him the gift of this apple. I wanted him to allow these things to be born. And who knows, if they live and journey long enough, we might see ourselves in all of them. To me, that's a love affair. Like not who's the right Adam, but like, hey, you're the short Adam, you're the tall Adam, you're the heavy Adam, you're the light. It's like, yeah, and then we all come together, sort of meld together as a man and go, this is the universal Adam.
Yeah.
We're all just different cells, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to play the parts. If you're like an accountant with, the pencil drops out of it, that's your part. Enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? It's like don't go, I wish I was more like, Brad Pitt. It's like, Brad Pitt's Brad Pitt. It's like stop. We live in such a comparative, distracted self, and I feel like a lot of this it's simpler than we think because it's more local. In other words, that like working on a character as an actor, it's more up to your choices. Everybody is defined in everything they do by I am this and I am not that. I am not like them. But if we realize every time we think like that, we're actually giving away, well, what do I think? We're using contrast rather than center to express from what we believe. So, authenticity.
Yes, and I love that we finish on that because, as I said, embarking on this journey of 100 heart warriors, I really just did it, well, relatively naively. I didn't even have a YouTube channel. I just sort of started with a friend of mine, number one, and just contacted people. But this recurring theme, if I had to pick one from 100, and I've tried to make it 100, like different types of men, from boxers to ballerinas, the whole expansive concept of masculinity. But the reoccurring theme, if I had to pick one, was finding each man finding his authentic self and then expanding from there to, really come into his power and his mission and his the highest version of himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when we reclaim our center. Like really, as I say, like the old druid, I am a tree. A tree doesn't try to get somewhere. It isn't interested about moving elsewhere.
Yeah.
It says, when I need to know, I go deeper. But when I feel strong, I reach higher.
Yeah.
But let me remain balanced. And I think that these are the models that will bring us back together. We've been journeying our anguish alone. And kind of that sense of I feel it, I know it. And if we're all different parts of a larger radiance, trying to put itself together in a new way and a very old way simultaneously, then wouldn't it be at the end of the game that man and woman would honor one another, that man would honor himself and woman would honor herself, and we'd go, oh, what a journey. What an impossible story we've lived as humans, right? I really do. I feel we're a species of such heroic capacity that has been so limited and boxed in by an old agreement. that is now upon us, but it's also the opportunity to go, don't need all of it. In fact, I don't even need much of it.
Yeah.
I just need to, like this tree, go, I'll hold my ground. I'll follow my authenticity. If I'm a sycamore, I don't ask you to be a sycamore. You be an oak, though.
Yeah.
We need
Amazing. All right, Leigh, please remind us again about your books, your art, your website, where people can find your amazing resources.
Yeah, thank you. I would, you can Google my name with art, and now, or what I would suggest is leigh.mccloskey.com, which is my website. There's also on Facebook, there's Olandar Foundation for Emerging Renaissance, or my name. Certainly it's public. And the books that I've created, and they are available through Amazon and also my website. My masterwork essentially is the tarot revision. It turned me into a tarot master. I didn't mean to. It's just I worked so hard. It's like being a woodworker. I got really good at it. So I really truly suggest that work, because a lot of times we want to know, who am I? And my joke would be always, well, which one? It's like we're so many different beings. And so the question of what and how do we begin to understand this deeper psychic structure? And that became what the book Tarot Revision really is. And the drawings are beautiful. And it's something that I really do feel is an effective instrument and tool, because I'm a tool maker. I wanted to create ways of addressing the psyche that give us an instrument where we can enter it and not be swept away by it. Find, like this, a sense of safe allowance and deep journey. So my other books are In the Splendor, which is this journey of the DNA that revealed itself through my painting Phoenix Arise, but it tells really this love story that leads to our DNA. And then a book that I do, if I were a billionaire, I'd put it next to every Gideon's Bible as not a rejection of the story of Genesis, but a deepening of it. And that's Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, a romance in two parts. And that I think it's something that is going to find its right time. And then my Codex Tour. These are my books that I spent 25 years on, exploring the nature of consciousness and multidimensionality. And as a matter of fact, they were used, some images by Flying Lotus, a musician, for his album Cosmogramma. And that was really rather marvelous. So, and then my grimoire, which is another book of magical spells I created, that I don't think you can buy, but that actually toured with the Rolling Stones. And then then the trying to think, and then the others were just some other elements. But really, if you go, you look for my book on the tarot. You can also go to my website and read an article on the justice archetype, because I have a sample article there. And go to my YouTube channel if you would. I really, my whole emphasis is, like these conversations, to say it's up to us to be interested, to be curious. Almost that sense of consciousness saying, if you're not curious about me, I'm not curious about you. I got way too much work to do. If you don't want to show up, don't show up, but don't complain about it. Show up. So these are the things. These are the subtleties. So on my YouTube channel, I really try and just say, let's look at it this way and this way and this way. Let's have a conversation rather than a critique, so that we start to re-engage our story. So.
Yeah. And I'll put all those links below in the description. So if you could either send me those, I know I can get the YouTube, the Facebook, the website. I might need you to send me your Instagram link and any others, because I'm not on Instagram. So, but I'll be sure to add those in the description so people can find you and explore all you have to offer.
Right.
Well, I'd say that's a wrap of 100 episodes that we've
Congratulations on proud of you. And I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing, and just everyone believing themselves. My wife, I've locked my wife out of the house, and I'm hearing her out. Can you pause for a second, and I'll come back and we can actually say goodbye. Okay,
Yes.
hold on.
So thank you everyone who's been involved with the Heart Warrior series and the offshoot, which I did with Jaman Speak series, where we go into particular subjects when our Heart Warriors return. They're all here on my YouTube channel, and this will be my last Heart Warriors. I think I've done enough. To get, you know, a great resource for men who are looking for inspiration and to see the hero's journey in other men's lives. So any last words, Leigh?
Gemma, I just wanted to congratulate you and to say thank you for your diligence and dedication, because I think there really is such an important need to really talk about these things and from different perspectives, because I'm sure every man had a different way of seeing and being. And I really think that's the richness. So I just wanted to honor what you're doing, because I think it's so essential to the present moment, and everyone that is curious and listening. I really do think we can tell a better story, and to look at everyone that's been talking about these things, because I think we're all on the same page. You know, we really can, but it's up to us. So thank you, Gemma. Thank you for everything.
Love it, love it. So I'll say goodbye now, and yep, we'll see what happens in the future. You could just hang on, Leigh, and we'll have a chat. Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for being here. Oh, wrong one.